Yo, what's cracking guys? Faison here, and today I'm bringing you guys episode 3 of Analyzing Albaz, a series in which we'll go over the branded archetype, all of its variants, and how to play it at every price point. Today we're going to be going over branded Eldritch again. This is going to be more of a mid-budget version of the deck, and for the purpose of this video we're going to be primarily going over branded Dogmatika Eldritch. I think you can very easily justify playing pure as well. There isn't really a clear winner in my opinion. They both have their strengths and weaknesses, with this one being a little more consistent because Nadir plus Ecclesia just adds insane consistency to the deck. But there is also an argument to be made for Pure because you can run more power trap cards in those slots. But I will show you guys at the end how I would change the deck if you were to cut the Dogmatika engine because I've been testing it both ways. Let's go ahead and get right into it. For the main deck, we're playing our 2 Lord, 1 Albaz. As I mentioned in a previous video, the reason we only play 1 Albaz is because ultimately you only need to resolve Branded Fusion once to set up your graveyard. It's just a nice plus that in this version of the deck you actually do get to resolve it multiple times a game because we usually send a Dark on our first turn. Next up we play our Ecclesia. This is the only Dogmatika monster. This is our Nadir target and the way we get to punishment. And the last monster is going to be our Necroworld Banshee. This is my usual blind send off of Branded Fusion. Between this, hard drawing the zombie world, and the 3 copies of Branded Fusion, you actually have 5 cards that get you to zombie world on your first turn, which means you have about a 50% chance of seeing it, which is awesome because it's basically an FTK against Flunder, which has historically been a very rough matchup for Eldritch, and it's also quite strong against decks like Sword Soul, for example. The other benefit is that even decks that don't inherently lose to it lose to Zombie World when you combine it with other cards, which we'll kind of go over as we get into it. Moving on to our spell cards, we play just pure consistency. 3 Eldland, 3 Branded Fusion, 3 Prosperity, 2 Nadir, and the only non-consistency card is our Zombie World. So right now we're playing 12 spells, and 11 of them force your opponent to use their negates, which is really awesome because in this current meta, people are really only setting up like 1, max 2 negates, and when you have 12 ways to force that negate before you even set your 5 cards, it makes it so that your opponent has a very rough time playing through your floodgates. Moving on to our traps, we play the standard Eldritch package of 3 Sanguine, 3 Conch, 2 Hawkero. I never miss the 3rd Hawkero. I say it every time. We really don't need it in the current format. This might change if we see another deck like Drytron that goes into their graveyard so consistently, but for now, this is perfect. We play 2 Punishment for our Ecclesia search. Ultimately, I wasn't too bothered about playing Punishment at 3 because the deck space is tight and I thought that there were better cards to be playing. But if you really like it, I guess you could justify it. It is quite strong into stuff like the Adventurer engine, which is nice. We play our Floodgates, which is 3 Skill Drain, 3 Rivalry, and 3 There Can Be Only One. I chose these because right now Floodgates are quite inconsistent because some decks lose to Tikaboo, some decks lose to Rivalry, some decks lose to Gozen, but none of them lose to all 3. Like, there isn't a perfect Floodgate outside of Skill Drain that just hits every deck. So the rationale behind Tikaboo and Rivalry is that they synergize quite well with Zombie World. Under Zombie World Rivalry, your opponent just can't summon new monsters unless they're playing Eldritch themselves, or a zombie deck, I suppose. And under Tikaboo, while they can summon new monsters, they can only summon 1 monster at a time, which means that Zombie World plus Tikaboo is like an FTK against basically every deck in the game except for Sky Striker, and Zombie World plus Rivalry is an FTK against every deck in the game except for the Mirror. So it makes it so that all of your floodgates are incredibly consistent, which is a huge, huge plus. Next up, we play our blowout cards, which is going to be 3 Strike and the 1 Golden Land Forever. As I mentioned in the previous video, the fact that we get to set up our graveyard early means that Golden Land Forever suddenly becomes consistent instead of like terrible, which is awesome. But yeah, this is going to round out our main deck at 40. Next up, moving on to the extra deck, we're playing 3 Mirror Jade, 3 Albion, 3 Lubellion. I chose to max out on this again because we're playing Extravagance. We don't want to lose all of our cards. We like to use our Lubellion turn 1, so it's important that we don't banish all 3 copies. We like to send the Albion off of Nadir, so we want to make sure we don't banish all 3 copies. And if you banish all of your Mirror Jades, then man, You just don't get to end on a you don't get to turn that branded fusion into something cooler. Like it just ends up being an actual foolish burial, which is quite lackluster. And then we're playing the 2 Entis. I think you could justify playing this at 3, but I wanted to make space for the other utility cards. We're playing the Link Spider Imduck, the 1 Lina, and the 1 Gustav. If you decided to play Entis at 3, I think you could justify cutting the Lina for it. I think Gustav is the most important out of the utility cards because it actually just comes up for game all the time, because Eldritch can set up an OTK in a simplified game state. When you have 1 Lord on board, 1 Engrave, you bring back the 1 Engrave, attack directly with both for 6k, and then turn them into Gustav and burn for the other 2k, so I really hate the idea of cutting Gustav. But ultimately, I guess you could also cut this for like a Titaniclad if you really wanted to. I just personally wouldn't myself. Moving on to our side deck, we're playing the 3 Lord of the Heavenly Prison for going first, 3 Lava Golem for going second against combo, 3 evenly matched for going second against decks that don't set up multi-negates, because as I mentioned, evenly matched is actually quite a good side against decks that do set up a singular negate or less, because you can always force negates with one of your 12 spell cards, all of which tend to force negates, and then you activate evenly match after the fact and they blow up their whole board. If your opponent has like a token on board, if they, let's say, are playing the Adventurer engine, or they're playing any Auroradon deck that happen to leave a token on board, because you cannot attempt to banish a token face down, if your opponent lets evenly match resolve while they control a token, they're forced to banish everything except the token. So yeah, I think evenly matched is really, really good this format. It was a little worse when people were setting up multiple negates because they would just negate the evenly matched anyways, but as it stands, I think it's quite good. We're playing 3 Judgment for obvious reasons, and the last card in the side deck that I decided was more of a flex spot is the 3 Shadow Imprisoning. I think this deck is already pretty decent against Despia. I think that Shadow Imp is like FTK against Despia, so you don't really need it if you don't want it. But I just like having it. I think you could justify other cards in this slot, though, whether it be like Dimensional Barrier, you could play Gamma, you could play like Anti-Spell, but I personally haven't been loving Anti-Spell. But yeah, the problem with this deck is that the deck list is quite tight, but there's a lot of cards that we don't have that you could very easily justify. So if you didn't want to play the Dogmatika engine, which is currently sitting at 5 cards, you could very easily justify flexing in like different stuff. I've been testing quite a few things here and there, from Gamma to like Heavenly in main, the White Destiny. I know a lot of people love this card. I've been going back and forth on it. I don't hate it by any means. I just don't know if it's like super optimal. The Torrential Tributes, D barriers, but yeah, there's like a lot of things you can justify. I'd recommend doing some testing on your own, figuring out what you like, because I don't think there's like a right answer. I just think that it's going to ultimately come down to personal preference. Like if you want to play the Dogmatika engine, the nice thing is the engine kind of solves itself. I don't think there's a lot of flex spots in this deck, except maybe like if you don't think that Zombie World, Necroworld, Banshee's working out for you, you could cut those. You could probably justify cutting the there can be only one depending on the meta at your locals or whatever. It's just that I wanted to build this deck to have the best chance of beating like the meta broadly, at which point I thought that like this is how you would want to do it. But again, it's kind of gonna just depend on what you expect your tournaments to have. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know how you guys would change the deck, especially as we upgrade the budget. How would you like to spend that money? I think we're going to be going over the most high budget version of the deck that I would make in the next couple videos. I don't know if it's going to be quite next, but soon. But make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what I can do better and worse around here. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace.